What's up, everybody? It's us, the LightShare team, back at it again with another episode. This time we have Tristan Lewis with us. Welcome to the show, bro.
Thanks, man. That's really nice to be here. I really appreciate you guys having me on.
Thanks for coming by. It's been, we've been exchanging some messages on Instagram for a while, especially in the last weeks, I would say, when I posted
2 weeks or so.
When I posted like a question, I think, for my audience about like, if you could go back any time in the past, how far would you go? Where would you go? And you said something like, I wouldn't change a thing, because I like the way things go, and I think this is the way they should be, and I like that. I resonated a lot with that. So
and from there, it just snowballed into a conversation that lasted throughout the whole day.
Yeah, dude. And I saw that you're into art, you're into writing. I'm aware that you have some past in the military as well, which is something very exciting for me to talk about. So I would like to delve into all these topics with all of you guys for this episode. And you know how we are, like we usually spread across every kind of topic that comes into the conversation, and we develop over that specific topic. But how did you come here?
Yeah.
What?
If you want to give a brief introduction about
how did it all started for you with the whole art kind of stuff?
So I started out as a writer. My father was an English professor years and years ago. When he was like 21 years old, he started. And he was a professor for 18 years. So naturally, one of his kids had to pick up the inclination to be a little more literary. And that ended up being me. So I was the kid that when I was 11, I was already starting to write. And then when I was 14, I decided I want to be the best writer ever. Stupid little thing to do for a 14-year-old, but hey, everyone has that. So I would insult J.K. Rowling openly in those days. I would go to my library in school and take out all the classic literature that I could. So A Clockwork Orange, for example, or Dante's Inferno, or Tristan and Isolde. Funny little thing, actually, I learned in grade 10 English class that if you're reading Dante's Inferno, the English teacher will leave you alone. Reason being, in this case, we were reading a play, The Importance of Being Earnest, and the teacher came to the back and she was like, Tristan, why are you not reading along with the rest of the class? And I said, well, for one, I'm already finished. And secondly, I'm reading Dante's Inferno. And she just looked at the book and said, I'll leave you to it. So
I wouldn't even mess with this kid. Like, what's wrong with
Yeah,
this?
exactly.
I've never heard that book before. Is it explicit or something?
So Dante's Inferno is
Divine
it's an
Comedy.
epic poem in 3 parts called the Divine Comedies, exactly. And you have Purgatorio, Inferno, and Paradiso. And essentially, it's the writer, Dante's, journey through hell, purgatory, and heaven. So it's
To
this
rescue
really
his
long
beloved.
poem.
Right.
To rescue
Extremely
his
dark
beloved
topics.
Beatrice, or what's
Yeah.
the name in English? How do you pronounce
Beatrice,
that?
I think, is actually the name in English as well. I don't think we ever changed that. The
It's-
English might have been bastards at one time, but we don't always steal everything.
It's really cool, and I saw an animated version of it's like a movie, but each circle of hell depicted in the movie is there's 9 of them. So each one is an episode, apparently done by a different studio every time. So you would see these changes in the style of the visuals and all of that. It's so cool. And I found it on
extremely cool.
it was on Amazon Prime a while ago, at least here in Spain. I'm not sure of the rest of the world. Maybe it's still available in the US or Canada or anywhere else, but I saw it, and it was just so epic, dude. To see all those concepts of different circles of hell as different stages, and they were attributed to different I don't know how to describe it, like sort of weaknesses of like the humanity of us. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That was pretty cool. And that was like a pretty badass way to answer to your teacher. Like, first, I'm already done. Second, I'm reading this.
Now, excuse me.
No, excuse me to my reading. So
Understandable. Have a nice day, said the teacher.
Yeah, exactly. So I started to delve like really, really hard into writing at the time. And after studying all these things, I was like, okay, I'm going to write a book. And when I think I wrote the book with one of my best friends, who actually ended up being my best man at my wedding, just a couple of years ago. And we finished the book in about 2 years. And after we were done, people were asking me, are you going to look for a publisher? And I looked over the book and I said, no, I'm not, because I can tell this was written by a teenager. I can do better. So I just kept going. I took a couple of years where I wasn't really writing all that much, mostly because I had joined the military at the time. And while I would spend a little bit of downtime just scribbling notes or whatever, there was never really any time for me to sit down and write. I did in 2019 eventually end up writing a short story called In the White Pines, which I sent to an international writing contest known as Writers of the Future. And they get hundreds of thousands of entries every year, every quarter almost. And within that, you have the winner, the 3 runner-ups, and then 150 honorable mentions. And I was actually able to get into the honorable mention category. So now I have a nice little thing in my office.
Awesome.
That's awesome.
Congrats.
It's always nice to look at because whenever I see it, I'm like, oh, I do know what I'm doing. Because I'm sure everyone has suffered imposter syndrome before, where you sit there and not know what you're doing.
It's a good benchmark. Yeah.
Exactly. And
not just before, to this day, still facing it. So
Yeah, all the time.
Oh yeah,
it's like ups and downs. It comes and goes. Yeah. Some day you feel like on the top of the world. Some days you feel like you don't know anything at all.
Yeah, I've had that while practicing drawing and painting, where like one day I'm like, oh, I kind of like this little thumbnail that I'm trying to do, and the next day I'm like, I can't draw a box.
Right. You showed me some practices that you were doing about like did it have to do with the Scott Robertson's books, like the how to draw one, all the ellipses and the the vanishing points and all that stuff?
For anyone that doesn't know.
Awesome.
Yeah, man, that's my life.
That's a good book, bro.
If you have any tips on studying it, I'd love to know.
Oh yeah, for sure. I could talk with you about it for 3 or more hours. So,
I love that.
Yeah, that's basically my whole art education, like both of his books. So.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I have.
You are on a good path, man. Yeah.
Yeah, I have like 7 books that I'm working through right now.
Nice.
But as for the art aspect of everything, I ended up going to that almost kind of in a therapeutic way, in a sense. So it started out with my wife and I were talking one day about Bob Ross, and I had never seen him growing up. So she was like, how do you never see Bob Ross? What are you talking about? So she sat me down, she put on Bob Ross on Netflix, and she was like, this is Bob Ross. Sit down, get educated. And I was like, okay, cool. So I did. And after a couple of episodes watching him make his happy little mistakes, I just turned to her and I'm like, hey, we could go to an art store, right? And she's like, why? And I'm like, I want to give this a shot. So I did. And then I think I evolved like past the Bob Ross stage pretty quickly because I realized how much of a discipline art really is, like in studying value, anatomy, construction, all that stuff.
Yeah, you got to know.
And I was like, this is fascinating. So I just kept going. And then there was one point I had been injured, so I wasn't able to go on a deployment. So I was just sitting in an office in like a warehouse, basically, where there was nothing for me to really do. So people were complaining about like, oh, we don't have anything to do. There's no work to do. I'm just sitting there with a sketchbook, just trying to draw figures. And I'm like, this is really hard, but I'm doing it. And then eventually...
I'm a bit
your
curious
cat's
about
the
the
best,
whole
bro.
military thing. Like because you seem like
Yeah.
as a kid you were. I don't know if you are into the military, like you wanted to go there in the first place, and then like all of a sudden you have like, oh, I'm a writer, and then like post it, I'm kind of an artist, and then like there's the military block that it's sort of doesn't fit the narrative,
Yeah.
What is Canadian military called? I
Uh,
forgot.
Royal Canadian Armed Forces.
Gotcha.
Or just Canadian Armed Forces. We recently started having the suffix of Royal, or prefix rather, of Royal with the Air Force and the Navy. I don't think the Army has it, actually.
Yeah.
So as for the military, I joined when I was just turning 19, roughly. So basically, how do I put this? So I joined when I was 16. I left for a year and a half because I was in the infantry and hated my life. And I was just, as a more creative person, I was like, these are all the guys I was avoiding in high school. I don't want to be around this type of person. So I quickly left for about a year and a half. And then I worked as an intelligence analyst. So I was kind of the guy that had to like research what was going on in a certain country and then tell my boss, hey, by the way, this big thing's happening. Or alternatively, I'd be sitting happily in my office, just chilling out, and then suddenly my sergeant would kick the door in and be like, "Hey, I need everything on China in 20 minutes," and you're like, "Oh." So you quickly scrabble and make a PowerPoint and all
Yeah.
that stuff. And
That's
then
where the
you
writing
and then
skills
you,
come in.
that's where some of the writing skills come in, and it also taught me quite a bit about public speaking. So I started to get over that fear, which was definitely good. So I spent about 6 years in the Army Reserve, and then I wanted to leave it because the primary reason that I had joined was because my older brother was also serving. Like, stop trying to get drugs.
Your cat's the best, bro.
Her name is Cleo,
Cleo the
or
best.
Cleopatra.
She's not.
So
She's not gonna stop until
catch.
she gets
Yeah, she's
that
not.
planned.
yeah, she's not going to stop. She might crawl in front of the camera here and there, just so anyone is wondering.
That's good. That adds more, more dynamic stuff to the podcast.
You're not going to jump from the desk to the plant. Come on.
You're sure about that?
Yeah. Can't really tell a cat what to do. So, so my older brother had joined for a couple of years prior to me joining. And so I spent 6 years in the Army Reserve, as I said, and then I switched over because I was like, okay, I'm done living in my brother's shadow because anyone that had met me had likely worked with him before. And they were like, oh, you're going to be really good at this. And it was like, no, I'm not.
Oh no!
Don't expect good things from me.
This sounds like a super villain initial story or something, where it just
And yet, strangely, not building a super weapon.
I was tired of living on my brother's shadow. Everyone was crediting him for everything.
Right? So yeah, I ended up switching pages, so to speak, and I ended up joining the Navy, where I went as what's called a bosun or a deckhand. And essentially, with the Americans, it's actually kind of interesting because a bosun specifically handles ropes and rigging, which is basically like the guys that'll like put a hooked chain onto a box and like hoist it up. Whereas for the Canadians, bosun does all of the deck maintenance, so like all the rust, painting, stuff like that. We do the lookout, we do the helm, so we drive the ship. We specialize in the boats. We do bosun's mate, which is essentially you're the guy making an announcement of shit's going down. And we also specialize in small arms, so rifles, pistols, things of the sort. And from all of those kinds of specialties, along with rigging, anchoring, stuff like that, like anything that has to do with the ship moving, essentially, that's not engine related. So after doing that for a little while, I had the opportunity to specialize into naval boarding party, where my job was essentially get all my kit on and my tack vest and rifle and all that stuff, climb into a boat, and then go onto another ship and start searching for drugs and stuff like that. Now, I'd like to preface that I never went on a real operation with that because after I had gotten the qualification, it started being phased out, and we stopped really doing that. Why is beyond me, politics probably. But I did do a lot of training exercises in doing that, so I still had the skills that kept fresh.
That's
Now,
what I was going to ask. Like, how was the training for all of that? How much different was the
Yeah.
Navy was from the previous experience in the Canadian forces?
so well, all of it is the Canadian Forces.
Yeah, but I
really.
mean, it's a different.
You guys go
You
through
were
like
in the
basic
infantry,
training,
and then you
or
were
Yeah,
right.
Yeah,
I'm not
so,
sure what word would go here, but it's like a
No,
discipline, like a different department, like a different, you know.
So the way it works with different elements is so with the army, I did my basic training where you do your drill, so like standing at attention and marching and all that good stuff. You learn your basics of shooting, and then I did my soldiers course, which is where you start like digging trenches and using a machine gun and marching with a lot of really heavy equipment and just hating your life.
Were you
So like
already
we
were you already fit before you started doing this, the military thing?
I had a good baseline fitness for sure.
Okay.
And then when I went army, it ended up increasing more and more, especially on my soldiers course, because we would have our really heavy backpacks and everything, which were, I think, usually about 40 pounds, when we were going on a longer march. And then they would just be like, "Hey, you're keeping the backpack on, but we're doing push-ups." And you were like, "Oh, all right, I guess we're doing that now."
Hmm.
Um,
Yikes.
so yeah, so we spent at the end of that course, we spent 5 days out in the field, so like out in the forest, just really hating your life. And in that time, I think I ended up getting 3.5 hours of sleep over 5 days. So
That's what
sleep deprivation
fascinates
became
me
something I can live with.
about this, like beyond the physical capabilities you develop, it's
Mhm.
like the mental fortitude that you kind of build up with this whole process, and the discipline that you kind of learn to respect and all that stuff. That's
Mhm.
fascinating to me, how much you can change in a short amount of time. Exactly what you
Yeah.
said. Oh, I guess we're doing this now.
Mhm.
There's no way around it. You have to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. My brother and I, we used to call that robot mode. It was you're so sleep deprived, you'll just do whatever. You're like, okay, I guess I'm
Three
gonna go
hours.
march for 3 hours now.
That's crazy, dude.
'Cause they
So you
just like
slept?
break your mind down and
Oh yeah,
build you back up more
Yeah.
fortified, I guess.
they do actually. And when we went into the field, my sergeant had warned us. He was like, okay, look, you're about to be so physically, emotionally, and mentally exhausted that at some point there is a good chance you will just start crying for literally no reason. And I was like, ah, that's not true at all. And at one
Okay.
point, I'm just standing around and I just start crying, and they're like, "You all right?" I'm like, "I have no idea what's happening to me."
It's all the emotions kind of pouring
It
out
is.
at any time, and yeah,
Hmm.
That's rough.
damn, dude.
Yeah, I think in that course, my favorite portion was definitely the reconnaissance. Because like putting on all your camouflage and all your gear and just running around through the woods, it's just super fun because you're just like you're playing a stealth game at that point.
Hmm.
Um, so after Soldier's course, I did my trade course at the time, which was intelligence. Learned a little bit on analysis, writing reports, and public speaking and things of the sort. And then when I switched over to the Navy, I didn't have to do basic again, thank God. But I did have to do what we call fleet school or naval environment training package, I think is what they call it now for some reason. But essentially, that was all about living on ship. So doing damage control was a primary thing, which was fighting floods and fighting fires. So I suddenly was doing firefighting and doing
Wow.
like going into a flood chamber, which was essentially like you would go downstairs into like this big open chamber, and there are like pre-made holes in the wall, and they would just have a switch in a control room where they would just start flooding the room.
Oh
And
shit.
so, like, your job essentially is to stop that water from coming in, or at least slow it down.
So you have like
And
a reparation kit or something to fix it, or
yes, And the
We have
funniest
to
thing is,
improvise, or how?
you actually do have to improvise a little bit.
Okay.
So like for my experience, I went down and they started flooding it. And of course, like you have a gigantic team, and like you're in my case, I was just the first guy that was down there. And then when that started up, I saw like this like ammo container basically that was like floating on the water around my feet, and I was like, "Fuck it!" and just grabbed the thing and shoved it against the wall and started to like try and cinch it in place so that it would actually just stay there. It did not work in the least.
I guess this type of exercise is like to develop the way you handle stressful situations, I would say. Like every time we see, in movies and stuff, like how an entire ship is like sinking and people are still like holding their breath and kind of floating around and kind of trying to open doors underwater and they're still holding their breath and stuff like that, and we're all like invaded by this anxiety type of feeling, like, oh my god, this guy, like, I don't know what I would do in that situation.
You do learn to handle it to an extent.
Because what's hard is to keep calm, in that
It is.
that
It
chaos.
is hard to keep calm. Deep breathing is definitely something that assists with that the most, I would say. Also, going into like, how do I put this? Essentially, you turn your mind off, and because of repetition, the things that you're supposed to be doing.
When you
So
say
you
your
just
mind, you refer to like your thoughts. You no longer have to think about anything. Like no
Yep.
overthinking, no second guessing stuff. You just enter this pure instinct mode that enables you to kind of access your prior experience. And that's
That's exactly
why
it.
for a fact that if you just repeat those formulas, you'll get out of this.
Yep, that's exactly it. And I've noticed that I do transfer exactly that sort of a process. I transfer that kind of thing into art a little bit, in the sense that I'm always searching for a formula.
I
So,
was gonna
like,
ask you. I was gonna ask you about that.
yeah,
Like, which things would you say are kind of related to the same pattern or the same methodology or something with art or any other area of life? Because
It's the
to
same
me,
when you start to crying out of nowhere, right? Same thing.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I would say that primarily the things that I've taken out from it, and by the way, I would like to mention that I am still in the military. I'm not out
Oh,
yet. I'm in the process of it. Like they've been telling me I'm going to be getting out, and I'm like,
Mhm.
okay, cool, why not? 12 years, let's do it. Um, so
Cool. Are
it's
you
it's
happy
nice.
about that?
Oh yeah, I'm looking
Awesome.
forward to it.
Awesome.
Um, because after 12 years, we have an educational reimbursement essentially, or plan, where I can get up to about 80,000 for schooling. So I can go to art school and have it paid for.
Awesome.
So I'm looking forward to the fact that these 12 years have just basically been the building blocks of now I can go pursue the thing I really want to do. And not really worry about it, not worry about loans or anything like that.
yeah. It's gonna pay
Hopefully.
off. Yeah.
Yeah, hopefully. Um, but as for how I landed in this situation, is that I ended up getting landed, which means I'm in the Navy, but I'm not allowed to sail. And the reason for this is because of a training mishap that ended up happening in 2020. And this is where I was thinking when you were saying, Adrian, that like you kind of turn your mind off and like start going into the formulas and everything.
Mhm.
That doesn't always necessarily work. So in my case, what ended up happening was we were doing what was called a personnel transfer, and we were just transferring people from one ship to another. Sounds easy enough. You go into the boat, you have the people there, and then you just drive the boat around to the next ship. Good to go. However, we were about, I think it was 20 nautical miles, I believe, off the coast of Greenland. And we went into the boat, and it was me and the other guy. I was playing navigator, and he was driving the boat, and essentially fog ended up rolling in at the time when we were getting launched. As the fog was rolling in, it turned out that our GPS stopped working because of some mishap with the equipment. I don't really know exactly what happened. So we had 12 other people in the boat, some of which had never been in a boat before. And so me and the driver had to try and remain calm as we could because we're sitting there going, things are already going wrong. We
Yeah.
can't let them know that.
You can't see anything because of the fog. GPS
We
not
can't
working.
see anything. So the ship was here, for example. We went in the boat. Went around and just stopped around here.
Mhm.
And as we were just around that area, I looked and said something to my driver, and then turned around
Was this
to look at the ship.
was it near any landmass, like a coast or something? Okay.
No, we would have been, let's see, a nautical mile. So we were about 40 miles off the coast,
Wow.
approximately.
Okay, that's pretty deep.
So there was no land at all. Yeah, you don't know isolation until you're in the ocean. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
So anyway, so I turned around to the ship, didn't see it anymore, and just to boil the story down a little bit, we did end up having our GPS wasn't working, and our compass, which was on top of the boat, which is what we were told to follow for a little while, that also wasn't working because we were apparently too far north for it to work properly. So
Oh.
we were going east on the compass, we were actually going west. So it was 180 degrees off, which is huge for navigation. So
The water's like super cold too, right? It's like ice up in the
yeah,
north.
it was pretty cold.
man.
Thankfully, I had a dry suit on, so like I didn't really feel that. I just felt the wind for the most part, and yeah, so it was cold. It was foggy to the point that we couldn't even see like 30 meters away from us. I don't know exactly what that would be in feet because I can't do the calculation right now. Uh, and on top of that, a storm was rolling
I'm not sure
in.
if you mentioned it, but was it nighttime?
No, it was daytime.
Okay.
I've experienced some nighttime shenanigans, and that also sucks. Um, but so we were going around for like 40 minutes or so, just lost in the fog. And oddly enough, Tom, the Americans almost hit us. Like it was
Oh no.
crazy. So like we were going through and we were like bouncing over waves and everything. And we're sitting there like, okay, so we're gonna go this direction, we're gonna go here. And at this point we're getting guided by radio because the two ships that we have with us, they can see us on their radar. So they're just telling us like turn a little bit right, turn a little bit left. In this case, they're using nautical directions, starboard and port, but whatever. So we're going along, bouncing over waves, and all of a sudden we just hear this wall, and we're like, "What the fuck was that?" And we just see this gigantic ship coming out of nowhere, and we're like,
Holy shit.
"Holy crap, we got to get out of here!" So driver thankfully had enough sense just to turn around really quickly and get us right the fuck out of there.
Was it like
So-
a U.S. naval ship or something?
Yeah,
Like
they were
a-
with us at the time.
Oh wow.
Like a carrier or something super huge.
I think it was a destroyer actually.
Holy shit, that sounds
So like,
bad.
it's still pretty big, especially if you're in a tiny little boat.
Yeah.
So so yeah, long story short, we ended up getting lost for like 3.5 hours. And when we were finally like back on the ship, my bosses were sitting there, they were like, "So how was that?" And I was like, "That was terrifying." And they're like, "Cool, go do the rest of your job." And I'm like, "Okay." So I'm like going over to get changed out of my stupidly wet equipment. And my buddy who was on my watch, because like the way the Navy works is you break things down into watches. So like you'll go work on the bridge or wherever for like 4 hours, and then you'll go to sleep for 3 hours, work for 4 hours, sleep for 3 hours, and then you'll just break it up like that. So you're really sleep deprived a lot of the time, and life just sucks. So my buddy who was on my watch tells me like, "Hey, go get some dinner." I'm like, "What are you talking about dinner? I've only been gone for like an hour." And he's like, "No, man, you've been gone for like 4 hours now." And I'm like, "What?" So I went down, got some dinner, and
You
I
lose
ended
track
up-
of time.
yeah, I completely lost track of time. And so this is where things end up taking a little bit of a darker turn, or could have. at the time. So after I got back from this whole thing, and I mean, like, we're back home at this point. So I'm in my apartment and I'm just hanging out, having a couple beers. Um, I realized kind of quickly that something was wrong because in the week that I had had where I was off, because they give you a little bit of time when you come back, in the week that I had had when I was off, I was drinking almost every night. I was calling my dad, who I have a wonderful relationship with, and I was just yelling at him. And I don't ever do that. So eventually my wife told me, like, hey, you should probably talk to someone. And I was like, that's a good idea. So I did, and I ended up telling my boss, like, hey, so the doctors think that I might have anxiety. And he was like, what are you talking about? You can't sail with anxiety. So he told me to go talk to the doctor that we have on ship. And the doctor ended up doing something that I really respected, which was instead of just taking my boss's word for it or my word for it, he sat me down and he said, tell me what anxiety is. So I told him how I feel. And he picked up a phone and he's like, this guy's not going anywhere. So I got taken off of ship and I've been on land ever since. So I've been slowly working through a process of release, more or less, and trying to recover from the whole thing. I ended up getting officially diagnosed with trauma-induced anxiety and general anxiety disorder. Thankfully, drawing helps that, at least a little bit.
Good.
So yeah, that's where I normally I wouldn't exactly go into huge detail in the story, but that said, for anyone listening to this, I do really want to stress the importance of mental health because I have realized through my experience how important it actually is and how real it actually is. And I know that you guys as artists, like, you know the importance of mental health yourself and how that can really play into art practice or even any kind of day-to-day life.
Not only as artists, like everyone should take care of that, you know?
Yeah.
Because most of the time we don't even realize we're going down a really dark path.
It's like the one artist, Mike Nash, who passed away recently.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
He was struggling a lot with like the mental anxiety of things, depression. Mostly because he was being really isolated. You know, he developed a lot of those anxiety problems.
It's really important to find someone who you can share anything with. You know, you can talk about anything with. That's it's pretty rare because most of the time you feel like, not like you're not confident, but you feel like, who am I giving this information to? You know, like you're not really sure who they are, and you know, it's like to build that kind of trust with someone takes a long time. So, but it's very worth it when you find it, because it's, you know, we always like to vent on someone and talk about our stuff and how we feel and all that stuff. For me, recently, you know, fortunately, I have wonderful people around me to share everything I feel bad about or happy about or anything with. But one thing that I consider that helped me a lot was to, you know, to just record myself. You know, I would record like my voice, and I would have like these offline type of episodes, myself only, just narrating my day or my recent feats or my goals or what went wrong, and this guy said this to me and I was feeling like this, and then this happened, and you know, just it's a microphone. It's not a person, but it doesn't matter, you know. It does matter at a certain degree, but what I'm trying to say is that you let it out. Otherwise, you may think of yourself like, what am I going to do? Am I just going to speak alone? You know, talk alone here around? You know, like there's nobody listening. What's the point? At least you give it like another spin to it. Like, oh, well, now I'm recording it with my phone. You know, it stays there forever. In my case, I did it because I wanted to improve my English. You know, I started this back in 2015. I was on a road trip with some friends across Europe, and I realized my English really, really sucked. So that's when I took it really seriously. I switched everything to English, my computer, phone, programs, everything I used. And soon enough, even my thoughts, I realized, holy shit, I'm thinking in English.
Yeah, that's a weird feeling, right?
Yeah. And dude, soon enough, I realized, you know what? Maybe I could do something with this. And now we're doing podcasts, So,
and I'm here to prove that you don't need to get that good to do it. I'm here just to be the baseline.
No, but
if it helps you feel any better, I can't speak French and I live in Canada.
Look, what I'm trying to say is that, yeah, there's always a way, and you should. I have conflicting thoughts about this because I do believe there's times in life where you have to isolate yourself a little bit and kind of understand what's going on, and it's very important that you don't stay there in that dark place. Because that's where we all mess up. We all have these ups and downs, right? It's fine. Yeah. We can't simply go through life like ignoring those things. Like, no, I'm good. I'm happy anyway. It's fine. That's not happening. No, it is happening. Acknowledge it. Just accept it. It's happening. Now, at least you can do something about it because now you've accepted that there's something wrong. So you fix it. Now, that's easier said than done, but I think it's an oversimplification of how it really happens because there's like different circumstances, the same way we argued about the formulas that you remember, you apply it there. Well, situations are different every time. So maybe the same formulas don't work every time, right? You have to be really flexible and adapt to each situation, each circumstance.
Yeah,
that's
you're completely right.
I consider it's really, really, really important. I can't stress this enough that it's very important to be as self-aware as possible, to kind of comprehend yourself. And with comprehending yourself, you start to comprehend other people as well. So you understand your world, and then you understand the world around you, And I believe you can't do. It's like when you train your mind and you train your body, you can't train them separately because, you train your body, your mind follows. You train your mind, your body follows. That's the way I see it. But
if you're blind to your own thoughts, I don't think it's impossible to grow even further as a person because the lack of self-awareness kind of inhibits you. But growing from your mistakes, allows you to,
Yeah.
Also, I guess.
Empathy is a pretty important aspect of this, like to be able to put yourself in the place of others and, try to understand what they're going through and stuff. There's a point where that becomes counterproductive as well because it ends up hurting you, like your HP bar. If this was a video game, you take your own life, in a way. You start taking damage yourself. So you have to learn when to say no, how to say no, and don't do stuff you're not supposed to do just to please other people, because that will lead you down another dark path, and then you'll end up unhappy again. And there's like this important balance that we all seem to be seeking, and it's so complicated to come across. There's so many things to balance out, like to learn when to do what every time. Man, that takes a lot of experience and practice, So it's fine that you're not, let's say, winning every single day, right? As long as you're learning something from it. I don't know if this makes any sense to you guys, but
well, I'm still thinking about the mental health thing, because do you feel like the trauma-induced anxiety was due to that like specific event, or it was something that was like building up and then we had this like specific moment where everything kind of blew off? Because it seems like the whole experience in the military, like overall, when you hear like a bunch of stories, it's very stressful for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if it's something that like kind of builds up until it explodes, or like particular events are way more stressful than others. And
I think that in my case, it was a mixture of the two. I think that the specific event definitely did trigger it. So I think that the trauma induced is definitely from that event. I think that the general anxiety would have been a buildup of a bunch of different things over time. Um, I think someone once basically said like it was just the straw that broke the camel's back, essentially. Like it was that one step too far. Um, so I don't, I wouldn't say that it's something that came about prior to my service. I would say that it is something that happened as a culmination of my time in.
Mm.
So those multiple stressful situations, one on top of another, eventually, I think my mind just went, we can't do this anymore. So I think that I eventually started having the thoughts of, okay, well, fuck everything else. Like now I'm the thing that matters most. Um, so I ended up like basically stopping with my drinking. Like now I'll drink once a month. And I quit smoking 3 years ago. So now every
Happy to
year
hear
on
that.
that date of quitting smoking, I'll go get myself a really nice bottle of scotch, which I still have the one from this year. So like it's that type of thing where like I think that it's important to learn how to reward yourself in even little tiny ways. Like at the end of the week, for example, I'll walk by the store and I'll go pick myself up like a little bottle of ginger ale for that night. And I mean like a small one. Like I'll do that for the end of the week. Or
Mm.
other tiny little rewards like getting myself a video game. Which I mean Steam does not help matters because everything's always on sale. Um, but yeah, there are, as you said earlier, Adrian, like sometimes these little formulas that you have to help yourself, they don't always work. Um, and I knew that I was at a particularly bad point when I would want to play a game to try and relax, and I'd open it up and be like, "Ah, I'm not in the mood for this one." Close it down and open up another one, and I would repeat this process for about 40 minutes or so, and then I would realize that I had been staring at a wall for 20 minutes and just not doing anything at all. And at that point, I was like, okay, I absolutely need to talk to someone. Because my old coping method of playing games just wasn't working anymore. And now it's started to become less of a coping mechanism. And now it's something that I truly enjoy again. Like, I'll make sure to have every bit of housework and all that done before I allow myself to relax and play games. So I think it's important also to not allow a coping mechanism to become your only mechanism, if that makes any kind of sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think it's unrealistic to not have like cheat days, you know,
Mhm.
because it's the same thing with like working out. You say you eat clean for an entire week, but you never reward yourself with fast food or something.
Mhm.
I think it just mentally drains you because you're not breaking that cycle, you know, of the clean eating. So you're kind of frustrating yourself in a way. That's what I feel
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah, and
Yep.
the reward is very specific, like to each person as well.
Yeah.
And like you just need to find the right balance, I guess. And
Do you think that
and
is?
I guess it plays into that self-awareness thing that like Adrian was saying, right? You need to know yourself very well to understand like why you were doing the things that you were doing, like the video game thing.
Mhm.
The moment that you realize that like you were doing this exclusively as a coping mechanism, I think like that's a bit in the okay. If I'm using this to cope with something else, maybe I should deal with that something else instead of
Mhm.
just coping, right? And then the video game experience turns out to be like more enjoyable because you're not using it as a like taking your mind off of things, have everything
Yeah.
solved, and then you enjoy it.
Yeah. And I completely agree with you, Dom, on like allowing yourself cheat days. Like there are days I don't practice art. Like I know I'm probably not going to today, but I might still watch a video or something like that, or I might just play games today. Like, it's important
totally
to allow
okay.
yourself that break, because if you don't, you're going to burn out. And burning out is one thing that the military taught me pretty quickly, is something you can't really allow yourself to do, because then you can't do anything.
Do you think that could be because you're not really enjoying the process of that thing you're rewarding yourself for when taking breaks? Which means you do this for, I don't know, let's take the drawing thing, right? You're trying to become better at it, and then sometimes you take a break. Because I'm asking this because I thought of myself these past 4 years. I've been working on my own IP and my own project, and I'm very dedicated to it. I think about it 24/7. I can't help it. I'm just so happy and so passionate about it. And I don't ever feel like I need to take a break from it or anything like that, But that's because I like it so much that I don't actually want to take a break. I don't want a vacation from that. Right. Now, if we're talking about something else that's just unsustainable long term, I understand. But the stuff like something like that, like your passion, your hobby, your whatever you like to spend time doing, does that thing apply as well? The reward kind of stuff, the taking that kind of break, even though you don't want to take it.
I think so. Don't you like go out with your dog? Don't you like you are always drawing for your project? Because you say like, oh, I'm always thinking about it. But maybe the thinking can happen like in many different ways. And maybe like taking a break, it's from the different actions and not necessarily from having it in the back of your head, Because like you can't help yourself out of thinking about things.
Yeah.
But
I'm
you're
aware
not like
of that.
always staring at that screen, right? So maybe that's the breaking point where you're forcing yourself to do the action that you don't actually like.
Yeah.
And I don't feel like you do that. I feel like you are constantly thinking about the project, but you are aware of the activities that you do on a daily basis.
Yeah, absolutely. Like when I was asking,
all contribute.
When I was asking that, I was very aware of these things because I know I'm not 24/7 working on it actively, But I'm like, I can't help it but to keep thinking about how could I fit together those two puzzle pieces from this concept, Maybe, there's, and at the same time, I'm kind of doing like some client jobs, or just going for a walk or working out or eating or doing my daily stuff, but I'm not actively working on that. So I wonder, does that count as, or maybe is that the reason why I don't feel like I'm burning out with this, is because I'm taking these involuntary breaks, or like I'm naturally stopping sometimes.
It's kind of like active rest from what you're describing.
Okay.
Like you're resting, but you're doing other stuff to stimulate your mind. So you're not exactly like just laying on your bed staring at the ceiling.
Yeah.
You're still like, doing stuff to think about the project.
Yep.
If that makes sense.
No, I think that makes complete sense. And I mean, like, Adrian, in my case, like, I might not draw today, but like, I'm same thing. Like,
You're
I'm
thinking
working
of
on,
it. Yeah.
I'm thinking of it all the time. Like, I'll look at an object and think, like, even if it's unrealistic in my skill level, I'll think like, how would I really go about this? Because I heard this recently from a podcast from Learn Squared. It was an interview with Aaron Libenick, I believe it was, and he essentially said, in your mind, you're 5 years better than you are now. So you're able to think of concepts and things that are beyond your skill level because your mind is learning a hell of a lot faster than your hands are able to keep up.
Yeah.
So I'm able to complete all of these really complex scenes in my head, and then as soon as I would start doing it, I have no idea what the hell I'm doing. But along with writing, for example, I'm always thinking of the novel that I'm working on with a friend, or the screenplay that I'm working on with my other friend. Like I keep telling people at work, like, I my weekends are generally busy because I'm working on so many different things. Even if I'm not actually working on the thing that day, I know that I'm still thinking of all of these different concepts at the same time, or like bouncing back and forth between them.
Yeah. I wanted to ask
So
Tristan,
yeah,
like what's your writing process like? Uh, how do you like start stories, or like how do you develop um like the whole scene in your head when you're writing?
And also,
Like,
you're writing a screenplay? That's so cool, dude.
yeah. So
it's awesome.
yeah, so I'm working on. Oh my God. So, and I don't want this to sound like bragging at all because I'm not. This is just a friend of mine once described me as like a Renaissance man because for me, I learned that I really like learning. So,
That's good.
um, so I'm working on a novel with a friend. We've been working on it for 3 years now, 3 or 4 years. And like working on it with him is super fun because sometimes the smallest little piece of world building will jump out at one of us and we'll have to call or text the other person really quickly. Like for example, at one point, my friend and I, another friend rather, we were just talking about like different spices to use in cooking and like how it's so interesting that this spice was used by rich people at one point. And I texted my co-author and I was like, dude, who controls the spices? So, like, there's the tiniest little bits of world building. So
I
I'm
love
working on
how
a
that
novel,
comes together, from
right?
the smallest details that you come across spontaneously. It kind of fixes something in the fictional story you're building up.
Yeah. So I'm working on the novel, I'm working on a screenplay, and I'm trying to learn how to draw and paint because, or at least digitally paint, because I got to the point where I was like, hey, it'd be really cool if I could paint some of the scenes in my stories and like show people exactly where my thought process is. To answer your question, Dom, as to what my writing process is, one of you guys might have to cut me off because I might not shut up for a bit.
That's
It's
okay.
okay.
Um,
This is your
Oh, you're
episode,
going
bro.
to do our job for us? Yeah, that sounds awful.
It's your episode, bro. Go on.
well, I mean, I like it being a natural conversation, right? So, as for the writing process, I generally approach it in a couple of different ways, and I used to have three different terms, and I can only remember two. Um, one of them I basically call a stranglehold approach, which is where an idea will hit you and you're like, oh, that's a pretty cool idea. And then you realize slowly but surely you are not able to stop thinking about that idea. And that kind of an idea, I think more often than not, is the one that I'll end up pursuing.
Mm.
I like to call another process just a slap, which is where you'll look at something and be like, this is super cool. And you'll just immediately start working. Um, Now, keep in mind, I don't always complete a lot of my stories. I'm sure that many people in many different art forms are the same way, where you don't always finish a drawing or whatever. Get away from there. So, um,
Wants to be part of the podcast.
she does, yeah. So as for the writing approach itself, I do approach it in different ways depending on the project that I'm working on. So for the novel that I'm working on with a friend, I'll do a lot of discussion back and forth and will meticulously plan things out, but will also allow it to grow in its own way. So we'll have like happy little accidents. We'll have like, you know,
I love those.
something on page 40 apparently relates to this thing on page 5, and we had no idea that that was actually going to happen. Um, so we kind of do an approach that I think Brandon Sanderson calls it gardening, which is where you're meticulously planning everything out. You know the inner workings of this world, which is something I'm trying to do on my own for a science fiction project, where I'm trying to blend like science fiction with traditional nautical stories like Horatio Hornblower or Master and Commander, to try and have like that slow paced ship combat sort of thing, because I always think that's really
How
fascinating.
how difficult is it for you to relate those two pages that you just realized, like, oh, there's a connection, they're related, like this thing on page 40, this thing on page 5, like how difficult is it for you to go back and kind of like rephrase it in a way that it's like more obviously connected? Or is that even an
Again,
intention?
don't want to sound like I'm bragging, but whenever we've had that happen, it was complete happenstance that it just fit together perfectly off the bat. Now that said, there are times where like there's a bit of a connection, and we're like, oh, this thing might be related to this other thing, and this is super cool. So like, yeah, we will go back, and
I'm asking
we're
'cause
basically doing revision while we're
I've had
writing.
that. It's so cool. It's
Yeah.
such a good feeling.
It's a really cool
So,
feeling, yeah. And you start to know your own project very, very, very well. Like, someone can point out a scene, and I'm like, that's this page in this chapter. Like, I know exactly where all of it goes. So, I don't know. I do a mix of either meticulous planning or just allowing something to happen. Like, I'll give myself the very basics of a setting, character name, and then I'll just let myself try and write. And of course, anyone that's written or even with drawing, it's the same thing as a blank canvas. You look at the white screen and you're like, what do I do now?
Yeah. You know the architect and the gardener type of thing, right?
Yeah, I think that's what I was alluding to.
Where would you place yourself in that spectrum? What would you say?
I would say I'm like somewhere.
A little bit of both?
Yeah, a little bit of both. I would say I lean a little bit more towards the architect these days. Like I like being able to meticulously plan something. And when it comes to the science fiction story that I'm working on, for example, I got to the point where when I was picking up how to draw, I was like, before I even start writing this, I want to design my own ships. And like have a visual reference for them. Because apparently I'm insane for some reason.
Now we're talking. This is something for Andre. He's a spaceship guy here.
Hell yes!
Yeah, I get the feeling, I'm trying to write like my own like little short CG movie, and then I spent like 6 months on the spaceship itself and like trying to meticulously plan every little corner of it. So yeah, I get this feeling.
Yeah, if you ever want help on that, I would gladly assist you.
I would love to talk to you afterwards about it.
Dude, yes. Yeah, like I know ships in the sense that like it's so weird. Like when I was first in the Navy, I was like, ships are kind of cool, sailing's kind of cool. And now that I'm getting told like, hey, you're probably gonna be out, I'm like, sailing's fucking awesome. Like it's like a part of my identity now that I'm just like, I don't want to lose that. There's one game actually that you might be interested in called Fleet Commander, I think it is. And they did a thing where I was like, I'm taking this idea and I'm going to put it into my design. And they basically have like this little side view that you do have on real ships where it outlines all of the different compartments and spaces of the ship. And I was like, when I'm designing a ship, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do like everything. Like full bore.
Yeah, there's no like wasted knowledge when it comes like to using what you previously knew, like to put in your stories or like writing your artwork, right? There's no I feel like the more that you can learn about everything in the world, like the richer your words, like the things that you create become, right? So like using the past in the Navy to like influence how you, maybe that's one of the reasons why you chose to like made it about ships, right? It's I know like so much about it.
Yeah.
Like why to just waste it off?
It becomes part of your world building process.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
Curious,
you should actually do it about something like based on your life experience, So I find that a wonderful idea to kind of pour in some personal experience.
Yeah, I don't know if it like personal experience per se would be maybe it's just like having an interest in something would push you like to learn about it,
Yeah,
because maybe you didn't have the opportunity to do something that like you were really passionate about. That's why you have like enthusiasts about like, certain subjects, right?
Yeah. I was just saying
mostly
that
comes rooted in
his case, no, it's fine. In his case, like he's more aware of those ships. He's been on them, he knows them inside and out. So like, why not, right? In our case, if we ever made like a novel about ships and stuff, I'm sure it won't be as much about the designs of the ships and stuff, but more about maybe, I don't know, some
Life on the ship.
personal relationship that we've been through. You know, we would like to reflect that through some characters, or I don't know.
Yeah.
But there's
Yeah,
always a
it's
part
that-
of you in the story. You know.
Yep.
Yeah, it's that difference from like Star Wars and actual science fiction, right? Where
Yeah.
Star Wars is like the space opera because it's more about the story and like the characters and stuff, and the ships kind of like don't make sense, but they look cool. And then you have like actual science fiction where they focus on the technology aspect of it and all of that. So
Mhm. Dom,
Sorry.
what were you saying?
Sorry, Dom. Yeah, you wanted to say something. I cut you off.
I totally blinked out. That's
Oh
good.
shit.
don't worry, we'll just stare at you until you remember it.
Something
No.
about happy accidents and how the ships kind of thing are like part of what you've been through.
I
Or
forgot.
do you ever have something like that with your stories? Like I see those settings and the characters you choose and all that stuff, and I'm wondering like what's the connection, you know?
Yeah, I'm kind of
your-
wondering that too, actually, because I've seen some of your work for Blue November, was it?
Oh, yeah. You're curious about like the whole world building process of it, or?
Yeah,
Just
like
more
now that
story
we're
aspect.
going on to world building, apparently.
Yeah, so I guess for my process, I literally just paint an image and then I'll see like what types of characters I can put inside that environment and sort of build a web around that image. So I'll probably design out like different scenes of that place, and then from there maybe I'll paint up some story moments like keyframes of characters interacting with other characters, and then from there is like the concept art stuff where you kind of design out the breakdowns of characters or like the props, the call outs for the buildings and stuff or whatever. And then for me, like I happen to do the story last, so that way I figure out like more of the structure of what everything looks like at first, and then I can interject what this character's thinking in this environment, or like the history of this environment or something like that. So yeah, I I have like a web that I did for the first book, Journey to the East, where I like laid out all of the props and things and the characters.
I feel like that
Probably
feeds
drop that
back
later.
you know, that fuels the story as well. Like once you know how things look like and stuff, you
It's-
kind of
yeah.
come across like different ideas for the story based on what those things look like, you know, places, characters,
It's definitely
technologies.
a bit easier. Yeah.
Hmm.
Because I'm assuming for you, Tristan, it's like, because you have to like imagine it in your head, right? How things look like. I understand that might be like really difficult. Like I probably have a hard time doing that as like as an artist. I have to draw things out in order for me to like come up with a story. But to come up with a story, just like imagining it is like really difficult for me. I don't
So-
know if I could do that.
I blame some of that aspect on playing video games. I learned last year, and for anyone that doesn't know this, it's a little bit baffling, but there are some people that have aphantasia where they cannot visually think of something, like they don't have images in their head, or alternatively, there are people that don't have a voice in their head and they don't have like the running monologue, right?
What?
Yeah,
Really?
there are people that don't have one of those.
Can't
and
you
they're
just
also-
become one of those and shut up this like annoying voice?
Is there a
Unfortunately.
name for the voice
It's
thing?
called aphantasia, I believe.
No,
at least for the image one.
Yeah, that one I knew. I just didn't know about the voice thing. That sounds
Yeah,
like
I didn't know about the
a
voice one
dream
either. I'm
for
pretty sure.
so many people with loud minds. You know?
Yeah, exactly.
Just
And-
won't
and
shut
that's-
up.
The weirdest thing to me is that I learned from that there are some people that don't have both of those things. So
Wow.
I do not understand how people like that think, because I'm able to do both simultaneously.
Yeah.
Like I'm able to picture basically a movie scene in my head if I want to.
Oh.
Yeah.
And
I need that superpower.
I think that's why
swear.
I ended up having that, having the love of writing, and then eventually going, "Hey, drawing's really fun." So now I'm definitely the weakest artist out of the four of us here. But then again, I just started like a year ago.
Well, if you consider like writing an art, I would say like we're
Yeah,
all
I'm
equal
pretty-
level.
yeah.
So,
yeah. Well, and that's exactly it. Like I know where my strength is at the moment.
Exactly. Dude, I lost
and-
count of the amount of times that imagining a dialogue or something sprouted
love
like an
dialogue.
entire scene idea that I had to write down, and kind of like then I started imagining what the visual aspect of it would be like, and then storyboarding, and then you come up with like an entire animation idea, like a short film or something like that. But then
yeah, to me, words
how do you
come
fit
first
that
as well.
with the rest of the story as well? That's the other side of the thing. It's a challenge, because you like it so much, but how does that relate to the rest of the story?
Yeah.
Yeah, and there are a lot of ideas that I have where like as I said earlier, like you're 5 years better in your head. Like I've had some painting ideas where I'm like, "Ooh, this would be really cool," and I'm like, I am nowhere near skilled enough to do this yet. So I'll usually like just sketch out or like even just write down like this is an idea.
Yeah,
And
Store
I
it
know we'll
somewhere.
go back to it at some
Write
point.
it down, save it somehow.
Yeah, exactly.
Just like this guy made Avatar, like he waited for so many years until the technology to shoot that movie came out.
Oh, I thought you were talking about Last Airbender for a second.
No. James Cameron.
Well, which is also awesome. So,
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Also very cool.
I rewatch that series like I think once a year. It is phenomenally written.
dude, that's my childhood. Like, honestly,
I only learned about it when I was 21.
Wow.
So about 8 years
Oh,
ago
man.
now, 9 years ago.
I haven't seen it, but I've heard so many writers, world builders, artists, talking about it, like about the interaction within the characters, or the world building, or the story. There's so many things, the character
Oh, yeah.
arcs. So
I will stream that for you. You have to watch that.
I gotta check it out.
I'll pay you to watch it. Like
Yeah.
Plus, they've recently, maybe a couple years ago or something, they released this new Legend of Korra or something like that, which is also from the right.
Yeah, that's called blasphemy, and I don't watch it. So.
Yeah, is it?
I
was it-
appreciate some of the
Well,
things they did.
What is it? Like
I
an
didn't watch it.
expansion?
I'm just joking about it.
Yeah. Some of the things
No,
they
it's
do with
like
that
a
series are
continuation,
good.
right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a weird continuation though.
So
I'm
what
not gonna
about
go
it?
into
Is okay. It's like derailed from the original thing. I'm guessing.
A little bit.
Okay.
Little bit. It's just that how do I put it? So basically they took the technology that was like starting to be a thing in the last series, and it hasn't even been 100 years, and suddenly the world is in an industrial revolution. And you're sitting there like, this jumped just a little bit too quickly.
Okay.
Like if it was the third series, that would have been amazing. But for the second series, I feel like something didn't work there. There are a couple of concepts that don't work.
Is it finished? Or are they
yeah.
still airing up? Okay. I was thinking maybe they will make like
That's
a
done.
big reveal at the end explaining why, but if it's done, it's done. Then
No.
It was all a dream. That's why it's
Oh god, I hate that kind of ending. I'm actually curious. So for you guys, I imagine that you guys have basically been drawing since you were young. What would you say are your biggest inspirations? Because like I know for me, one of my biggest inspirations with any of this, be it art or writing, or rather visual art, I should say, would be like old school fantasy stories, like King Arthur or Robin Hood, or like even like going into games and whatnot, like definitely things like Legend of Zelda or Bloodborne, like different sorts of moods. What would you guys say inspire you the most now, and from when you were younger? or influence, I suppose, is actually a better term.
Yeah. Tell him, Dom.
You guys want to go first?
I can go first. Like,
I
so
don't
guys-
know what to say.
No, to me, like when I was a kid, it was watching like movies and seeing like cool shit in movies and thinking like, oh, scientists do those cool shits, you know.
Yeah.
And I thought like I wanted to go into science, and in my entire life I thought I would be like an engineer or something, that I wanted to like actually build the stuff.
That
And
explains
when
a
I
lot.
went to college, like yeah, and it makes sense that I'm more into
Yeah.
vehicles and hard surface, right? And then I realized that okay, I don't actually like the stuff right now. Like I went into computer science, like that was my first attempt at college, university, and it wasn't really like what I enjoyed. I like the creative process a lot more. And although you can be creative in those areas, like I felt like it wasn't in the way that I wanted it to be. And then I started to like really look at myself and really self-analyze, like, okay, why do I like the things that I like? I started analyzing my habits and stuff. And I discovered that like the story aspect of movies, it's what really like grabbed me. And then like the cool props and stuff, it's just like the visual it's like the visual candy, you know? Like it keeps you in there because the world is interesting because it's different. But then what I was really into was more like the psychology side, the storytelling, those aspects. And I kind of like merged those two things into what I do now, you know. The idea of designing things comes from that like building foundation. And then like the idea of storytelling, it's what like comes from psychology and all of that. And that probably stems from the fact that I had to deal with some psychological issues when I was a kid. So I was forced to do a lot of therapy and like like really in-depth thought and understanding like how human beings work. And you kind of find out that like those two areas are both super interesting. So that's why like my designs, they're not super technical. They're more like serving the story. And they're just like technical enough to kind of make sense. And yeah, and then like my inspirations were guys like Da Vinci, you know, because he kind of did everything. And I feel like that's yeah, of course it's a super like far-fetched goal, but being able to look at the story and analyze like every little bit of aspect and still make everything make sense, which is why I can't like the process that Don mentioned about making the visuals and then the story filling that up. Like to me, they go very much hand in hand. You know, like I write a little bit and then I design a little bit, and then like that they keep building on each other, and then like every single element also builds on each other. So like they care.
That's what he meant, I think. I thought at least, like he meant like he combines both of those things.
Yeah, but like I can't start with the visuals. You know, like to me, like that's the part of the design process that like. Okay, I need a like maybe keywords, you know, or something that starts
as you
the design.
paint the image, as you develop the image,
photography or something.
No, before the image. Like I can't start with the image.
Okay.
Yeah, because that's like the design aspect that comes from the idea of like, oh, scientists do this, you know, because science like starts from a proposition or for like an idea, and
yeah, I mean, you always start with something in mind. Yeah, most of the time.
And maybe like you notice something that is actually happening. But like you don't design the experiment without like a goal, and maybe what the experiment finds is not what your goal was trying to aim for, but that's like the happy accident part of it. But yeah, I think I don't know if that answers the question of what inspires me, but like it started with movies. To this day, still a little bit movies, but I feel like the world around us and technology developing and like personal relationships, like all of those, they do inspire me a lot to create more things that not only look cool but have meaning. And yeah.
No, I think that answered the question very well, actually. Though that does spawn another question for you specifically, which is, do you not start with the image because you're worried that the image will influence your own design?
The image is kind of like the means to an end. So if I don't know what the end is, like it's maybe like, okay, if I just do a sketch, you know, like a random sketch, that's fine to do without any kind of keywords in mind. But if I have a goal with the image, then I'm way more like keen to make it work for that goal, right? I'm very goal oriented. So let's say that I want to design a ship, right? I need to know what that is for and like what's the story surrounding it. And maybe it's just a couple of keywords, like this is a attack ship that works for this kind of civilization. Because if you look at everything that human beings make, it's like it all makes sense if we look at the goals that we are setting for the things that we make, right? So the prop tells so much about the civilization that built it that I don't think you can just create something out of nowhere and then like try to fit the civilization into the prop instead of doing the other way around, right? Fitting the prop into that civilization or that culture or that environment per se.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe like I'm being too pragmatic about it, like to like I don't know, not allowing myself the freedom to do the other way around.
But do you feel good doing it that way? Does that make you happy?
It's hard because then when you look at your designs and you realize that your mind is really 5 years ahead of you, then you're not really happy about it. So I don't know how to answer it. But
My point is
I'm
that
satisfied
if
with
you're
the process.
okay doing it that way, then so be it.
I understand that like that's my process, So like I'm not fighting the process. I'm trying to like make it work for my goals.
Good.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like when you want to do some form of like exercise or something like that, you kind of understand your limits. You're like, and maybe if you can expand them later on, but you kind of work with what you have at the moment, and then you learn how to like grow out of that, right? You don't really fight your limitations on like, oh, I won't do this because I'm not capable of doing because I'm not capable of doing the way that I want to. It's like I'll do what I can with what I have, and then I have more capability to do more things. That's when I'll do in a different way.
Mm.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you, Andre.
What would you say was the most influential movie growing up? Actually, that one could be asked to all of you, now that I think of it.
Well, there's the funny and Disney love answer, which is Star Wars, and there's like the thing that I think it's the actual answer, which is like James Bond, because he went to the scientist and all of the like super nice designs and props and like gadgets were there. And
I think this is the first time that I hear you mention it. So far, it's always been Star Wars.
No, but that's because like if I look back at the oldest memories, like, okay, when did the first idea of becoming a scientist came from? It was like James Bond, because you have the guy with the white coat and like, oh, this thing does that.
Yeah. No, that's really, I don't think that's a bad answer at all. Like, I used to be really, really, really big into Star Wars. And then Disney took over, told me that 25 years of Star Wars knowledge was worthless. And I was like, well, fuck this now. And then I joined the Navy and got really into Star Trek all of a sudden.
Yeah, you know what
about you guys?
What Andres said, I think, has to do with like different moments of your life, different periods of your life, being inspired by different things, depending on.
Oh, you were about to say in space.
What?
I thought you were about to say being in space.
No.
What kind of drugs did you use?
But yeah, like let's say each period of your life is influenced by, it's kind of like a natural process, the things you grew up with, the things you're into now that you won't be into probably 10 years from now, and stuff like that. What influences you at each stage of your life, if you're asking me, in my case, when I was a kid, I like cartoons on TV, like Cartoon Network and all that stuff, X-Men, Dragon Ball Z, and all those superhero based type of things, but then it slowly started to, and it's nice because I was like, I became aware of this transition towards like a more fantasy based kind of background, you know, like the Lord of the Rings and more magic type of stuff. So, but then also that happened quite recently, actually. I realized that I'm more intrigued and inspired and motivated and stimulated by stuff that has happened to me in real life, conversations I had with people that I met, that I've heard the stories of and motivated me. And then seeing other people make awesome stuff, like awesome projects, personal projects, releasing them. And you become very inspired by that, by the feeling of like doing something that feels meaningful to you and is fulfilling. But also like at a more technical level, like which things exactly. Well, in my case, like, yeah, people close to me, all their achievements in life, which I believe I will never be able to top, you know, that makes a character in my mind. Like, oh, this could be this character in this story. And then you imagine the dialogues that we mentioned earlier, you know, which are probably coming from conversations you've heard, you know, be it real life or movies or this type of character storyline or this other one. But I'm trying to not, let's say, dive too deep into the fictional stories and stay in touch with my real life stories, which are equally as impressive, you know, if not more. But yeah, like for instance, I think I'm an ultra gardener, you know. Like I plant the seed and then boom, let's see where this takes us, you know. And then later on, I start to kind of define like a perimeter across that, around it, you know, and kind of define a little bit more like the shape of the building and the shape of the whole garden thing, like for following that example. But yeah, the one thing that I had the most amount of inspiration from is he's right there, bro. There he is. There he is.
Looking at you like, what do you want?
Yeah, like I'm sleeping, bro. Leave me alone.
Yeah, leave me alone.
Yeah, it's all right. So this is how my story started, you know, like with one thought, which sparked one image, which sparked more questions, which sparked more questions. And the more I fixed and I answered those questions, more questions started to happen, you know, and who are these guys and what's this world and what are they doing? What's their purpose? Where do they come from? And who do they know in that world? Is there anyone else in that world? And stuff like this that just, bro, and I ended up like over, it's been like 4 years of actively working on this now. And I've been amassing like a huge load of like notes and stories and all those kind of spontaneous mental notes that I have to write down. Because I've tricked myself so many times in the past, like, I'm going to remember it, no worries. You know, I'll keep it here. And then I'm like, oh, yeah, I know the main thing, but what were the details that I was so excited about? So that's why I never miss out on that anymore. I always write it down. And yeah, I'm not sure if I answered your question, what inspires me, but big part of it is what I said. And then it keeps growing, you know, because you're always finding more stuff and new stuff that is probably not even new at all. Like probably stuff you didn't pay attention in the past and you see it again now, and now it clicks. Now it's like, oh, there it is. Yeah, I know exactly where this goes now. And you adapt it to your own story, you know, like that's what reference is, I guess. You're kind of
definitely
driving that inspiration towards your field. You know, you're filtering it through your own processing, your own
lens.
You exactly. Dom nailed it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
The advantage of being soft-spoken.
Yeah. What about you, Dom?
Um, I guess I've had a lot of inspirations growing up from most of the movies that I watched as a kid. You know, like adventure movies were like a big part of my life. I've probably mentioned this on like every podcast. But like
Whoops.
the adventure genre is like that's like it's like my biggest inspiration for um like my IPs and stuff. Like Indiana Jones, The Mummy, Tomb Raider, all that sort of stuff. It's just
Yeah, I could see
something
that.
fascinating about like finding that lost treasure and having the character, you know, go through all these different obstacles to find it. Same thing with like a detective genre, like Dishonored, something like that. That kind of influences my Blue November project.
Mhm.
Um, s- Someone, I don't know if it was you, but like several other people said to look into Disco Elysium.
Yeah, I told you
Is
that.
it? Yeah, it was
Is
you.
that the game you told me
Uh,
about?
Yeah, I try and
yeah,
sell people on that, and if you haven't played it, the Yakuza series is some of the best writing I've ever seen. Like the
gotcha. Yeah.
cinematography in Yakuza is phenomenal, and I don't know if it's because. So I noticed one thing when I was playing through it because Yakuza games are all Japanese, and you'll trick yourself sometimes into like you'll be watching a 40-minute long cinematic, and I'm not kidding. Some of them are really long. Like the intro to the third game, I believe, is an hour and like 10 minutes. So you're just sitting down and watching a movie until you start playing the game. Um, it's phenomenally done though, and I'll be listening to the dialogue and everything, and reading the subtitles, and then I'll just start checking my phone, and my brain's like, "Yeah, don't worry about it. You've heard Japanese enough. You understand it." And I'm like, "Wait, no, I don't." So I'll go back to it. But one of the things that they do is they let silence linger a lot more than I've seen in any Western property. Like you'll have a character or two, or rather two characters, like sitting at a bar, and there will be silence for like a good 30 seconds while they're just staring at their drinks. Western cinema, I've noticed, even games, doesn't really
Yeah,
do that. They're
more
not
fast paced.
comfortable with silence.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, Disco Elysium and Yakuza, some of the best writing I've seen in any game. And
Nice.
Yakuza
Got
is like 7 games, so have fun.
it. Is that on the what console is that on? PC or?
Uh, I know that all of them have been released onto Steam. Um, I know that a lot of them were released on PS4 because my buddy introduced me to technically the first one because the prequel is Zero and it didn't exist originally. Because you have 0 to 8, and
Mhm.
then I'm pretty sure it's on every console. I would imagine,
Gotcha.
at any rate.
Cool.
Disco Elysium is as well, I believe. And Disco Elysium is the same sort of thing. Like some of the best writing I've seen, some of the best voice acting that I've ever heard.
Mhm.
And amazingly, the narrator, who is extremely strong, it's his first gig in voice acting, and you wouldn't even believe it to hear him.
Oh wow.
Yeah, the art style is extremely painterly as well, very similar
Yeah.
to how Dishonored did it. Because I'm
Hmm.
starting to replay through Dishonored now and realizing just how painterly it all is and how skilled it all is. Like this is a game from 2006, I believe, 2007, and
Hmm.
it still looks phenomenal now. And Disco Elysium does the same sort of thing. Like the only 3D in Disco Elysium are the character models. Everything else is drawn isometrically, but it's drawn so
Oh wow.
convincingly that it looks like a 3D model.
Dang.
It's very impressive.
I like those timeless games.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It's got a very like abstract kind of feel to it. I like that. It's
Mhm.
but
Yeah,
yeah. Go ahead.
well, I was just gonna say, like, I've noticed over time, like, I initially started out with drawing and I was like, I want to try and go hyper realistic, and then I was like, no, I'm not gonna put that much work into anything. Because like hyper realism, I think someone once said like you might as well be a photocopier at that point. And I kind of agree with that because there's not really much expression there. And I've realized I'm slowly adapting to liking I suppose like a like almost Magic the Gathering sort of, where it's like a semi-realism.
Mhm.
Like I'm starting to enjoy that sort of artwork a lot more, even though I'm nowhere near being able to do that. As you can see when you look at my Instagram, like the most recent thing I did, I think was a painting of a battleship, and it was just a study that I did. Um, but yeah, it's I think as a newbie in art, I think it's really interesting to see how the common question that a lot of people have when starting art is the usual, like, how do I find my style? And
Yeah.
thankfully, I was exposed to enough very, very skilled artists off the bat, and then eventually found you two. And almost everyone that's more skilled was like, "Don't worry about it. It'll come naturally." And I realized that it's very similar to finding writing style in the sense that you will subconsciously pick up little tricks, little techniques that another artist uses.
It's what I usually
And
say
then that'll slowly start adapting.
about
Sorry?
style. It's what I usually say about style. You know, it's like a succession of self-plagiarizing steps that you follow.
Mhm.
You know, where you just keep reinventing yourself a little better next time.
Mhm.
So then, during all this long path, you end up looking back and saying, holy shit, I've come a long way, bro. Look at what I do now, what I used to do back then. You know, it's changed, but it's sometimes it's more subtle and sometimes it's very drastic. But it's so
Yeah.
cool how that happens, you know, because it's not like you're just trying to put in everything you learn from different sources. So that ends up becoming you know, it's like a mixture of all those other sources together, all those references and all those idols that you admire and stuff. You know, you want to paint like them, you know, but
Yeah.
you can't paint like them. You'll paint like yourself, but in a way that kind of satisfies you in the end, you know, because you go like, I think I'm getting closer, you know, but it keeps evolving. The more you do it, the more it, I don't know. That's my take on this, but yeah.
Now that I think of it, were you guys primarily self-taught?
Yeah, I did study graphic design,
Okay.
so it's still. I'm grateful for that because it's definitely not what I intended. Right, I was aiming for illustration, and they said, oh, it's full, but you can do this instead. You know, graphic design is cool, logos and branding, and I'm like, okay. They were like, yeah, they still have some stuff that, you know, like 2 hours a week of illustration, for instance, or you know, stuff like that. But then they put in the photography stuff and the branding, corporate design, and all that stuff, which is cool because they taught the same fundamentals. You know, like these laws of like perspective and like proportions and, you know, how to fit together different shapes. And with photography, I learned about lenses and how a camera works. And then there was some history of cinema and stuff, which also taught me a lot about how to understand and comprehend animation and moving images and stuff like that. So it's like all that knowledge comes back in when I find about concept art, which primarily needs drawing skills, which is something that I've loved all my life. And I suddenly come back, you know? So, of course, the hard thing you realize is that it doesn't matter how well you can paint if you don't have good ideas. And by good ideas, because what's the standards for that? You know, well, it depends on what are you working on, you know? But it's hard to design, to come up with original designs and functional designs and stuff that works, you know, that is objectively pleasing. So being good at painting is just half of the equation. You know, in my case, that's how it was. I was so focused on being able to paint well that then I realized, holy shit, I don't know how to design anything. You know, I feel like I suck at design. So I started to kind of, you know, combine both of them at the same time. Like, okay, like, let's say I'm quite okay with painting now, but now I really have to learn how to design stuff, because all I see around me is like amazing people just coming up with awesome designs, epic stuff every time, you know. And I was overlooking, because some of them, maybe they were a little lower, some of them higher in the level of painting skills. Yeah. But dude, you overlook that because you're so immersed in the idea. You don't care about that anymore. So I was like, holy shit, I wasted my time. You know, I was spending time doing the wrong thing. No, it's not the wrong thing, but it's definitely something to take into account. You know, it's very important. So I don't even
It's funny you say
remember where this comes from.
Wrong thing. Because I just read an article yesterday that basically was saying that with how to draw, for example, not to go through it cover to cover, because apparently you'll end up wasting your time learning things you don't really need to learn. And their suggestion was to like look at a project you want to do and then use the book almost as a reference tool of how do I go about doing this thing. Personally, I'm not going about it that way. I am going through cover to cover, even though it is fucking impossible to do sometimes. But
I wanted to say something like that, you know, like don't take the lessons as like very rigid and solid type of, yeah, like doing squares in perspective or cubes or spheres or ellipses. You know, it's okay if you want to do that, but it would be cool if you could use that process to kind of visualize an idea that you already have. Imagine you want to design this, you know, you're into like some fantasy and stuff. Let's alchemy shop. Okay, let's design this in 3D with that perspective and stuff. You know, it's a cube and a triangle on top. It's like the roof and stuff. It's still basic shapes, but you're still practicing the same things that are being taught from the books with your own stuff. It's no longer just meaningless squares and circles and all that stuff. Now it's
I had a friend who did that. He had like a big stack of paper like this, just full of lines and ellipses and, you know, really structural, fundamental stuff. Like
I'm not
kind of
saying
stuff you
that's,
see in.
yeah, I'm not
it's
saying
not
that's
bad.
wrong.
Like
it's not bad.
But
I'm just saying
what
if
I
you
saw
have
from
something
his,
in mind, use it.
Like, yeah. I saw from his final work though, like everything felt super stiff from all the fundamental practice he was doing, but he didn't necessarily like go into gesture a lot and like feeling out the lines and being more expressive, I guess you could say.
yeah,
But he fully broke out of that years later, and now his stuff looks more like he's got a voice instead of just following the rigid academics of drawing.
yeah.
So I think that's
I'll
important.
go a little bit of both, you know. Like what I used to do, it's I'd have like the actual practice, which was like doing all the exercises, strictly to the book, and then I would have like an hour where I would just do whatever and draw for fun.
Okay.
And it was
It's like the homework,
what I did with the book,
which is freestyle.
What?
It's like the homework, you know, after the class, which is like freestyle.
And I went through the book like cover to cover like 3 times. So don't be afraid to go in like one. It's not
Holy
good,
shit. That's pure dedication, bro.
Yeah, and when I say like cover to cover, I did the exercises and I copied like every single drawing that they had in the book. So
That's
it's like
kind of what I've been doing.
went through it like literally cover to cover. And
Do what you gotta
to
do.
be honest with you, like although I like the creative approach as well, like being like more loose and doing for a certain goal, like taking a project and doing for that, I would say like, in my opinion, that would be something extra and not necessarily like instead of, because what I see most often than not, like in the studio, like young professionals, is they lack a lot of fundamentals and especially perspective, and that's because they have the like. It's very good that we have 3D. It's very good that we can cheat our way through,
But you
but
can't
like
skip the traditional
you cannot
stuff.
skip it.
Exactly.
Like,
Yeah.
the
That's
mistakes
where I
will show,
started.
like, and even if you use 3D, if you don't know what you're doing, like it will not look good. So it's hard. I think it's like hard, but the fastest way is
There's
through
this there's this meme of a kid, you know, with like a staircase, and he's lifting his leg like 5 or 6 steps ahead, you know, and on each step it's written like perspective, color theory, all that stuff, you know, values, thumbnails, and he's pretending he's willing to go from like nothing straight up to the pretty pictures kind of stuff, you know?
Yeah.
So if you skip all of that, it's pretty much an impossible thing. It's going to be disastrous.
It definitely is.
You have to go through all those steps of learning all those fundamentals.
Where,
like, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, that's where I started off. Kind of was like, I was like practicing like in pen, like doing little gestures and stuff like that originally, and then because basically I went from I enjoy painting to if I want to be able to make the kinds of images that I'm thinking of, I need to learn how to draw. So I ended up finding a teacher who taught me like just the very basic bare bones fundamentals. And like just a crash course on like this is kind of how perspective works. Go and do this exercise. And like he'd make a scene in 3D of like just a simple like cube, sphere, cone, and cylinder, and it was just one image. And he was like, do that in 10 different perspectives. And I was like, well, fuck, all right. So then eventually I ended up starting my own little, I guess you could say my own little self-taught program. Where the 7 books that I'm working from, I'm going to be doing them in sequential order. And I can't remember the exact order, but like I'm starting out with how to draw, going on to how to render. After that, I'm going to be looking at Michael Hampton's figure drawing, looking at fundamentals of creature design, color and light, and then working into a concept art book, which is basically just like, here's an idea, like, design a pirate crew. And then after that, I'm going into framed ink. So like I'm trying to sequentially go through each subject matter. Surprisingly, I can't find anything on environment art. But I guess that's something that will just happen over time anyway.
Remember that book that I told you about, like the color and light from James Gurney?
Oh yeah, I already have that one too.
Dude, that one's awesome. That's exactly what we were talking about earlier, where, you know, you're not actively invested in the act of painting what you're learning from. But when I read that book, I was on a road trip and I couldn't paint. I was away from my usual workspace. So all I could do was to read the book, and I was so observant of everything that I read on the book outside, you know, like the way the sunlight hits these type of leaves at this time of the day. And I swear, man, you become so aware of those things that when you sit down, when you come back at your desk and you sit down and you start painting, it's like you have all that information way more ingrained in your understanding of how it should work. So you approach it in a different way. I don't know how to express this. It's like details that you've read there, you know, and you've been observing. You've been seeing those things in real life. So now you already have like a base, you know. You no longer sit down and start guessing what it should look like. That's not to say you don't need reference anymore. Of course you need, but at least now you understand it a little better. You know?
Mm-hmm. I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, color and light
there's a book on environment art. I'm trying to search for its name. It's something about like environment painting. It's a really famous book. I can't remember the name for the hell of me.
Well, if
but it's more on traditional painting.
Audience knows any interesting books on that matter, let us know in the comments.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, okay. Composition of outdoor painting, Edgar Payne. Yeah.
Oh,
I think like that's one of.
I've heard of that one. Completely forgot about it.
Yeah, it's been on my list forever because like they don't sell it in here, but I always heard the name, and yeah. In terms of environment, I'm way more into those traditional like landscape paintings, other than like city paintings and stuff. But maybe it can help with the fundamentals.
Yeah, maybe. I've been looking into a book called The Sea Painter's World. My dad got it for me for Christmas. It's by Jeff Hunt, who's a British maritime artist. Has phenomenal works in it too.
It's about like naval geography or something.
Yeah, here I'll. Yeah. Yep. Love having a rolling chair. So anyway, this is the book that I'm talking about.
Damn.
Oh,
That
wow.
looks
Nice.
awesome, dude.
It's cool.
Right?
Yeah.
He goes into huge detail. Like, this is a guy that will look into the history of a certain battle if he wants to paint it. So, like, let's see if I can get this page here that I'm thinking of. Of course, the thing you're always looking for is never the thing that's, like, right there when you want it, right?
Is that right, man?
I love
thinking-
this book anyway. So.
I'm thinking of what Andreas said earlier about like falling in love with all the different aspects of creation, you know? Like learning
Yeah.
how to do a little bit of everything. I find that I feel like I resonate quite a lot with that, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm no musician, but I enjoy trying to create music and to
Yep.
at least to imagine what it would sound like, you know, in the background of those scenes that we've already been discussing,
Yeah,
with the
no, I
dialogue and
completely
all that
agree with
stuff.
you.
Or
Like, I
thinking,
have a violin in my room that I haven't touched for about a year, but like
Mhm.
I noticed a tiny little bit on how to play.
yeah,
But like, yeah, like just learning that is super
Yeah.
enjoyable.
Then
And
all-
this is the page I was talking about. So
Oh,
he'll look into the positions of the ships that are described in the battle and like where the light and wind were coming from, so that he can end up making these absolutely insane paintings.
that's awesome.
you see how many things you have to take into account, like
Oh yeah.
the depth of the level of understanding of like how things work in real life affect the final painting and the ideas you put into the painting and stuff. It's just, I don't know, I love it so much, you know, especially these people who pay so much attention to every single mechanical piece in like a work of engineering
Mhm.
to kind of understand how those joints are bind together, you know, and then come up with like a robot design or like a something based on that, because they understand how those mechanical parts work in a completely unrelated machine, you know.
Yeah.
Which is the same thing for us. Like we pay attention to how animals are built to create creatures, you know, because
Yeah.
they follow the same mechanisms, the same anatomy thing, which is just distorted. It's just different proportions, but all the skeletal system, the muscular stuff, it's all there. If you go,
It's
if
all
you want to
kind of
go,
interlaced.
yeah,
Yeah, that's really fascinating. I will
Yeah.
be right back.
okay. I'm just thinking. I was like gonna say about, you know, I've been playing God of War recently, the first game, 2005, I think, or something. PS2, PlayStation 2, bro. And that was the first time that I got into. It was like a calling, you know, to ancient mythology, Greek mythology, all those creatures and all that stuff. That was pretty dope. Very epic.
Yeah,
It was
man,
nice
those
to,
games are very cool.
it was nice to live through all of that again now recently. I played it on my streams at the end of some of my streams. But yeah, I guess I can now see where this whole fantasy thing comes from, you know. It was gradual, but I moved through it, and yeah, all that ancient world type of stuff, ancient mysteries and secrets of history and yeah, all that fantasy aspect of it, like all that magic, which is reflected through so many tales and stories and movies
Myths
and
and
games.
legends.
It's everywhere, bro. Like books. Yeah, exactly. It's in every single type of product you can think of. I would be inspired by a song, even, you know, like this particular line from the lyrics. Yeah, that's enough for me to create a painting, you know, or at least to start like Tristan, we're just talking about like going back to the sources of inspiration thing. I was just mentioning like Greek mythology and stuff. Since we mentioned games, I was playing God of War, the first one, 2005 or something. That's PlayStation 2. So I just played it again recently to kind of go back to those memories, you know, and it was so cool, bro. And now I thought about how this gradual transition to like fantasy stuff came to happen. You know, it's the Lord of the Rings, it's The Witcher, it's God of War, it's like so many things.
Oh man, I played through The Witcher like 6 times.
It's a long game.
It's a long game, and I initially was not good at the game at all, and then I played Bloodborne and somehow got through that, like both with a friend and like also on my own. And once I was done, I went back to The Witcher, and I was really good at it all of a sudden, and I was like, huh, this needs to be harder. So I turned it up to the maximum difficulty.
Yeah.
And I love the max difficulty on Witcher 3 because like it forces you to study the creatures, and it forces you to get the different potions and oils and grenades and stuff like that you need to defeat these creatures.
Otherwise, you don't use all the game, you know, everything that's in the game. You just go through it with the sword and just kill everything, and that's it.
Exactly. And so like on the...
Is Bloodborne similar to Dark Souls or something like that?
Yes, it's part of their... It's generally now, I think it's called the Soulsborne series because it's part of the same studio.
Okay.
Basically take Dark Souls, shove it into Victorian Lovecraftian horror.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful.
It is. I love that stuff, man. I love all that ancient god type of beings.
Oh, yeah.
I don't have words to describe that. It's so cool.
What was that other game with the big monsters, Shadow of the Colossus or something?
Yeah,
Dude.
Shadow of the Colossus is one.
Yeah.
Dragon's Dogma does that really well too, actually. I recently got into that. And yeah, like I could talk about The Witcher forever. I love that game.
I never played it actually. Just
Phenomenal game.
I need to keep myself away from games because like that's my addiction, and I can't control myself if I start it off. So yeah, I need to control myself. It's my whole life goes down the drain if I start playing a game. So.
Yeah, my high school years spent 800 hours plus on a video game.
I know the feeling. I was playing Elite Dangerous, which is like a space flight simulator. And for Christmas, my wife got me a joystick, and my buddy got me a throttle. So I was like, well, I'm just like sinking my whole life into this now.
See ya.
My world. I'm gonna for a while.
But I'm amazed that I can still like keep pretty controlled over it. Like if I have work the next day, I'm like, oh, it's like 11. I need to go to bed. Like I can't do this anymore. I honestly think that
it takes military discipline to be able to do that.
I really do think that that's part of it. Is because like you realize very quickly the importance of sleep. Because you know how absolutely screwed you are the next day.
I'm still so impressed by the 3 hours of sleep. That's crazy.
That was pure adrenaline, I'm sure.
Oh my gosh.
How long did you have to do that for?
It was 5 days, 3.5 hours of sleep over a 5-day period.
Oh,
so like
holy
you would
shit,
have like 30 minutes of sleep here and there.
I thought 3 hours a night. Oh,
it was horrible.
Is that
you
what they call
hallucinate?
Is that what they call the Hell Week, or something like that?
No, that would be Hell Week is more like the Marines, Navy SEALs, I believe.
Okay.
I'm not 100% sure. I don't really I don't know all that
But
much about the Americans.
It definitely sounds like it. You know,
Yeah,
like
it's like
5 days of pure madness, like training.
It's mostly for Navy SEALs. Yeah.
Yeah, theirs is a hell of a lot more intense than I think anything I've done. But
But
yeah,
still,
it,
dude,
like
5 days, 3 hours of
I
sleep.
did go through that with the Navy as well. With the Navy, we would do we do something called basically called night watch, where like
Mm-hmm.
you stay on board the ship overnight to like be security. Now the crappy thing about this is that you're basically shoved into a little hut that's like 2 by 3 feet. So like you're just sitting there and staring at a wall for 8 hours and just hating your life. And I keep warning people if it's their first time, like you're gonna go to dark places because like you're suddenly remembering things from when you were a kid and you're like, ah, yeah, that's a thing that happened. Um, so like the sleep deprivation you get on those nights are horrible because like you'll start your shift at like 7 a.m., work until 12, rest from 12 until 4, 4 to 6 you're back on, and then from 6 to I think it would be about 2 in the morning is when you rest, and then from 2 in the morning to 7. And because you're awake in like staggered periods like that,
Yeah.
I was doing that at one point where it was like every second day I would have off, but then I would go back to doing that for a month and a half. And I'm sure I shaved off like 10 years of my life just doing that because the sleep deprivation was insane. And
You
it
learn
just
to
sucks.
value every single second of sleep.
I started drawing a lot. like I would just take a picture on my phone and be like, I'm just gonna copy this. Like I'm gonna spend 4 hours doing it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy how much I think sleep is like the most undervalued fix for a lot of stuff, you know, because a lot of us, you know, tend to live that way, you know, overdoing the sleep schedule and sleeping less than we actually need because I have to do this and I have to do that, and especially when we're younger, you know, with those
Some people think it's like a badge of honor not to sleep.
But do you remember those
not.
motivational videos from the 2012
it's not
around
good.
that time?
Oh,
You know,
like they'll wake up at 5 in the morning,
sleep.
4 hours of sleep thing.
Sleep is for the weak, you know, like
Sleep
Yeah.
yeah, you as a young kid, you know, you take it for granted. Oh, yeah, right. Sleep is for the
Yeah.
weak.
Until you're
And
dead.
Yeah. Yeah, it reminds me of I don't know if you guys would have ever seen this because I think it might have been a Canadian show primarily, but it was a cartoon from like 2010, I want to say, maybe earlier, called Clone High. Basically, the whole idea is like this shadowy government organization clones a bunch of famous people and then shoves them all into a high school. So you have like Gandhi being best friends with Abraham Lincoln, who's best friends with Joan of Arc. And like they're the three primary characters just wandering around. The school jock is JFK, because of course. And then like the school like the preppy valley girl is Cleopatra. And so like you just have these weird relationships going on. And there's this one episode where Abraham Lincoln is just like, I can't sleep, I'm doing this thing. And he gets into a fight with Joan of Arc. And it's something like, I'll sleep when I die. And she's like, you'll die if you don't sleep.
Well,
That's that's so true, dude.
I went through a period where I was like, it was 6 months, and in a good night during those 6 months, I was sleeping like 5 hours, and I don't want to go back to that again. You know, like most of the nights were like 4 hours a night, and that was because of work. I was working like on another city, and
No,
it's
it
like,
happened to me for
That's
about
all.
a year and a half, around 2014, 15. You know, I just suddenly started to kind of sleep for 5 hours a night or something like that. I would go to sleep at 12. I would wake up at 5, 5:30, something like that. And I would just be so busy with art projects and stuff like that. I was like super hungry. Not that I'm not now, but back then, boy, that was the beginning, you know, like, yeah, and now we do this and now we do that. And I didn't feel the effects of the lack of sleep, right? Because again, when you're so young, you don't care about that. Hence how most youngsters spend all nights, you know, awake playing games or going out and drinking those Monster Energy kind of things. And yeah,
so glad I never got into energy drinks.
bro,
Same.
No, I got into them, but like Monster is a pretty bad one. So like, don't drink that. Drink Red Bull instead. It's way better.
In the army, we used to say hydrate and change your socks. So like, drink some water, change your socks, you're good to go.
we got to talk to Red Bull, bro, to have them sponsor us or something. This episode is brought to you by Red Bull Energy.
Yeah, we'll both like
Sweet.
advertise Red Bull and shit on Monster, you know. So like, it's a promotion. Yeah.
Oh man.
Okay.
Yeah,
So we've been going for like about 2 hours now, and speaking of like lack of sleep, I'm starting to feel the lack of food in my body. So,
That's right,
Same,
dude. It's
someone's
been,
getting lunchtime.
being so like, yeah, I feel like we could have talked for about like 6
Bro,
hours, man.
2 hours went by
Probably.
so fast.
Yeah. There's like so much more we could talk about.
Man, yeah,
Absolutely.
So you had a hell of a life, man. Like, what the hell? It's super interesting to hear your stories.
and I'm only just turning 30 in like 4 months.
Awesome,
We're all
dude.
still young here.
Yeah.
I turn 28 in a couple months.
Oh man.
Well-
I'm still pretty young.
Thank you so much for coming here, bro, and
Oh, thank
talking
you so
about
much
all
for
that
having
stuff.
me.
Yeah.
I bet a lot
Yeah,
of people
man.
will find interesting this for many reasons, because we've been talking about military, about discipline, mental fortitude, how to write stuff, how to get inspired by different things to kind of create your art, your projects and stuff. So
Yeah.
I'll be watching this again for sure.
Yeah,
Especially
same.
the writing stuff, because I want to learn better writing. I want to learn how to write better and improve my stories and stuff. And I don't know, any closing thoughts, anything you would like?
Well, first off, thank you very much for having me. And secondly, with regards to writing specifically, I would love to come back and talk even more about that.
Sure.
Like if I could make like a little, I don't know, like a little lecture, basically. if you
Bro,
want.
that would be amazing.
That would be awesome. Like, I would really like a like writing focused episode, you know, because we're
Yeah, I
like
can-
all over the place, and that would be
100%. I will draft that up, and I'll happily come back anytime you guys want me here.
Absolutely.
That's
Anytime.
awesome,
Yeah.
man.
I'm sure she'd appreciate it too.
That's great. Well, then that was it, I guess. Thank you all so much. To the people who are watching us, feel free to let us know in the comments down below what your thoughts are on this. If you have any tips regarding any of the topics we've discussed, any observations, any thoughts, anything, just let us know. And yeah, until the next episode, just stay creative, take care of yourselves, enjoy your time, and have a good one. Thanks again, Tristan.
Thanks very much, man.
Thank you, man.
See ya. Bye-bye.
Cheers.